Hello guys, welcome back. I hope you're all doing great. I hope everyone is having a great weekend. It's a rainy day here in New York. I grabbed my umbrella and I went to the Labo boutique. I have visited Labo many times over the course of the last month. The city exclusives are out on display, and until the end of the month, as you guys know, they're available in all the cities. So I went because I wanted to get my nose on some of the city exclusives that I haven't had the chance to smell. With every trip to Labo, I feel like there are only a certain amount of fragrances that my nose can handle, and there were a few that I sort of glossed over, didn't pay attention to, and a few that you guys mentioned that you're enjoying in the comments to some of the videos. So I wanted to try Osmanthus 19, the Kyoto exclusive. That's a 2024 release, so this is the first year that it's available to other cities. I wanted to try Poivre 23, which is the London exclusive. And I also wanted to pay a little more attention to the Tubereuse fragrance, even though it's a New York City exclusive and it's obviously available to me all year round. I feel like I always gloss over that fragrance. So I wanted to go in, I wanted to get it on skin, and I was deciding which samples I might purchase to talk about in this video. And I was definitely very intentional because their samples for the city exclusives are more expensive. So I purchased two. Each of them is $14, which is a little obnoxious. And to be honest, when I walked out with these two, I was thinking in my mind, how did I spend $28 on these two samples on fragrances that I'm not even sure are going to turn into full bottles, although one of them I like. The Poivre 23, I do think it's a great fragrance, but I was thinking I spent $28 on these two samples. I could have gone to Preemp's department store that recently opened not far from where I live, and I could have purchased the Voyage Imaginaire's Immortelle fragrance. It's on my wish list. Not that it's $28, but this could have gone towards a bottle of the Immortelle from Voyage Imaginaire's. But nonetheless, I have these two samples. I was very intentional about which ones I was going to purchase, and I purchased the Tubereuse 40 and the Poivre 23. I did not purchase Osmanthus 19. So let's talk about Osmanthus 19 first. Released in 2024. The notes on Parfumo for the fragrance are quite simple. You have frankincense and lavender, you have Osmanthus, and then it says ambery notes or amber notes and woody notes. So not sure what that means, but nonetheless, I sprayed the fragrance on my left hand, and then I came right home and I am making the video. So it is here on my left hand. I sprayed a good 3 sprays. And I have to say that it was difficult to detect anything. And it reminded me of the Gaiac fragrance. I'm not sure what the number is that comes after the word Gaiac, but it reminded me of the Gaiac fragrance. I recall spraying it earlier this month and not being able to really detect much of anything. So I thought maybe I'm going anosmic to the fragrance, maybe it's me. And the sales associate was explaining that Osmanthus 19 is a very soft wearing fragrance. It's very light. Yes, it's very soft, it's very light, but on my skin, it's to the point that I can't even detect the fragrance. I would have to put my nose to my hand into the perfume to really detect anything. So I don't pick up any lavender or incense in this fragrance. I barely pick up on the Osmanthus, which I expected would give me sort of that apricot-y component, a floral component, maybe a leathery component. So I had really high hopes for this fragrance, and it fell very flat, close to the skin, and I don't really know what to make of it. It smells like a very light veil of maybe something a little bit floral. I can't detect what floral it would be, and maybe something a little bit apricot-y, but hardly. And then I get a texture. So I feel like It's a veiled fragrance with a texture, and the texture is nice. But I would think that if I had a tester of this or a full bottle, I would maybe have to spray this 20 times on skin, and I would think that this would sit very close to the skin. Now, I don't have a sample and I don't have a full bottle, so this is a very first impression, an early impression based on 3 sprays at the Labo Boutique. So take it for what it's worth. If you guys have tried this and you own this, or you have a tester and you know more about the fragrance, feel free to leave a comment. On my skin, it's at most a veil of something that hints at something floral, maybe a little bit apricot-y, and maybe the ambery components together with the Osmanthus gives me a texture on skin. And I like textured fragrances, but I really wasn't willing to spend the money to get a sample of this one. So moving on to the Tubereuse, let's talk about Tubereuse 40, the New York City exclusive. So I think I asked the sales associate one of the stupidest questions. Being that I'm in New York, I was wondering whether it's a cheaper fragrance, being that I'm in New York, which probably made no sense to her. And then I asked her if after this season, after this month, that the city exclusives are available in all cities and they retire the fragrances back to their own cities, if this one would be reduced in price and be the same price as the main line. And she said, no, this one is more expensive. All year round is more expensive than the other fragrances because it is an exclusive. So it was probably a very stupid question, but nonetheless, I thought that because I live in New York, I feel that I should be able to go to Labo with a driver's license or a passport and not have to pay a city exclusive price for this fragrance. And it turns out in the end, I'm glad that I got the sample and it's not a bad fragrance. It turns out in the end that I don't think this would turn into a full bottle anyway, but let's spray it and talk about what it smells like. So the perfumer behind this fragrance is Alberto Morillas, and he does all of, or maybe a lot of the Gucci, the Alchemist collection. He does a lot of those fragrances. And he has his own brand, Mise en Cire. I think he does all the fragrances, and that's his brand. And so he's the perfumer behind Tubereuse 40. And this one is quite interesting because it's not a tuberose-centered fragrance, which is very typical of Labo fragrances. Often the name doesn't even match what the fragrance smells like. And I have gotten my nose on this before. In passing, I would go in the boutique, I would spray it on skin. So I would say that even though the note listing is extensive for this fragrance, I would say that this is more of an orange blossom fragrance. I feel like you get freshness from the orange blossom. I feel like you get floral from the orange blossom. I feel like you get green components in here. There are other florals. I think there's Jasmine Absolute, there's Tuberose Absolute, I think there's Mimosa in here, there's Oak Moss Absolute. So you have greenery and you have this freshness and you have florals. It's a fresh fragrance, and maybe the Tuberose is a hint. And I actually think the Tuberose takes a backseat to the orange blossom in here. It's also a bit musky, and there are woody components in here. And I think on skin, when it fully dries down, I feel like the woody components are a little bit more obvious, and the oak moss is maybe a little bit more obvious in the dry down. But in the opening and in the mid portion of the fragrance, I would call this a fresh fragrance that comes from the orange blossom, and the floral in here is more from the orange blossom than it is from the tuberose. The tuberose is not the type of tuberose that I normally am attracted to in fragrance. I feel like I'm attracted to tuberose that goes creamy and is sometimes paired with like a coconut sort of note in fragrance, along the lines of Moon Bloom by Hiram Green, along the lines of Carnal Flower by Frederick Malle. This is a completely different sort of fragrance. This one is a more transparent fragrance. This one is a more watery fragrance. And this one does not have lasting power. I really don't detect it on my skin after a few hours, to be quite honest. I feel like it's a skin scent after a couple of hours. So it's nice, but it's not a tuberose scented fragrance. So it's a little misleading. You definitely have to get a sample. You definitely have to try this out. You can't blind buy this. It's not a tuberose focused fragrance, and it could be a big disappointment. If you're thinking orange blossom, it's nice, but it's not anything unique or groundbreaking. I feel like I could get this in many other fragrances out there. And so that is my opinion on this one. But I will say this one and even Poivre 23, they don't have the synthetic aspect that some of the Le Labo fragrances have that are a little bit off-putting. And I recently spoke about Mousse de Chêne 30, and there's another one that I liked a lot, and I actually own a bottle, the Myrrh. Is it Myrrh 55? Yes, Myrrh 55. Myrrh 55 and Mousse de Chêne 30, unfortunately, have this synthetic aspect to it, and you realize it as the fragrance dries down. So those two are captivating in the opening. And I was definitely captivated by both of them, Mousse de Chêne and Myrrh 55. I still have the bottle of Myrrh 55, but as it develops on skin, I just wore it the other day, there is something that's a little bit off-putting to my nose in the dry down because of a big synthetic aspect. I know synthetics are in all fragrances, but when it's obvious, it's a little bit off-putting for me personally. And even though Myrrh 55 is attractive because it's a little bit vintage leaning, so I do find it attractive. It has the jasmine in the opening. I do find that in the dry down, it's not really as much to my liking as it is in the opening of the fragrance. So I do think that Le Labo does get some slack because some of the fragrances are synthetic smelling, but I will say that I have a number of fragrances that I find to be really beautiful that don't have that problem, or I don't have that problem with the fragrance. Ylang 49, I actually have a backup bottle. I love that one. I have Lys 41, is it 41? I've had that for years. So there are many fragrances like the Bergamot 22, the Rose fragrance, I think it's Rose 31. I have many that don't have that problem. The musk fragrance is great. The aldehyde 44, I think, as much as I like it, that one I would group with Myrrh 55 and with Mousse de Chêne 30. I do get the synthetics in there. They're a little prominent. So it depends. It depends. Not all of them are super synthetic to my nose, in my opinion. And this one, Poivre 23, I think is beautiful. Really, really like it. I'm glad that I got the sample of this one. I do regret getting the sample of the Tubereuse, but this one I really like. So let's open it and talk about what it smells like. So this one was released in 2008, the Tubereuse in 2006. So they've been around for a while. And the perfumer behind Poivre 23 is Nathalie Laurson. And I have this on skin on my right hand, so I'm going to spray it again. This is a great fragrance. I really like this. So this opens quite peppery, and the peppery components really lift off the skin, and it's very energizing and uplifting, and I really like how the fragrance wafts off the skin in the opening, and even as you're wearing it, it does waft off the skin very nicely, so I think the performance is nice. It opens peppery, spiced, a little bit smoky, but not too smoky, and then within minutes, within 5-10 minutes, as it starts to dry down, you get a vanillic component, but it's not a sweet vanilla, it's not a sugary vanilla, it's a very smooth, sort of smoky vanilla. You have the labdanum in here, the peppery components that are so spiced in the opening sort of subside a little bit and it becomes smooth, so it's not too peppery. There's a fragrance by Comme des Garçons that I recently tried. I can't remember exactly what the name is, but I know a lot of their fragrances have some peppery components, but the one that I tried was very, very peppery, and the pepper was prominent. It felt like too much for me. And then you have a fragrance that this reminds me of, Nishane's Ani, which is a peppery vanilla. And this sort of made me think of that, but this is much nicer. I am not a fan of Ani. That one is too vanillic and sweet. This one, I love what this one does with the vanillic aspect of the fragrance, because you have the smoky labdanum and you have this sort of peppery component that doesn't strike you the way it does in the opening. It's more smooth when it dries down, and I love the hint of that smokiness. It's not too smoky, it's not too dark. It's really great. It has a texture, and there's also frankincense that runs through the fragrance, but everything is balanced just right. I feel like Nathalie Lorson did a very, very good job here. It's not too smoky, it's not too peppery, it's not too sweet. It's not a vanilla that is sugary, saccharine, and sticky sweet. You have a little component from the woods in here. There's sandalwood and gaiac wood. The patchouli is in the base. It's not really prominent. The frankincense is prominent. And the labdanum, it gives you something a little smoky together with that smooth, peppery aspect. So the peppery aspect of the fragrance is with the fragrance even in the dry down. So in my opinion, to my nose, I don't feel like the peppery aspect is only in the opening. Often that sort of note in fragrance, I feel, could subside and leave the fragrance by the time it dries down. This one, I feel, is with the fragrance, but it's not as prominent. It's a little more smooth. It's not as spicy. In the opening, it's a little bit more spicy, and it comes off the skin, and it's very energizing. But when it dries down, it's part of the fragrance. It's part of that smokiness. I think it's very well done, and I'm not getting anything synthetic, so that's not a prominent part of the fragrance. It's really very, very nice, actually. Very well done. So let me know in the comments if you guys are familiar with any of these city exclusives from the House of Le Labo. And as always, thank you so much for watching, your support, and your comments. Until next time, bye guys.